Hi there, ho there, and welcome to the newest podcast for Welcome to the New You. I am Larry Green. I am the Executive and Clinical Director here at the Gainesville Community Counseling Center, and we bring you this podcast to help you learn about different modalities, talk about issues related to emotional health, spiritual health even, sexual health, and how to overcome any challenges that you may face in life. So in the podcast, we will talk about issues related to depression, anxiety, bipolar, trauma, mindfulness, and different ways to handle whatever situation you find yourself in. As I said, my name is Larry, and we're here today with David Beasley, and I'll let David introduce himself in just a little bit, but David is a therapist here in the community. He's in private practice, and he travels more than anybody I've seen. Every time I see him on Facebook, he is somewhere with his kids, and I find it incredible. I'm jealous. So just to give you some information about us, the Gainesville Community Counseling Center is a nonprofit 501c3 organization which offers free and low-cost mental health services to the community at large. You can reach us at 352-448-9120 or on the interwebs at www.gainesvillecounselingcenter.com. And with that, I'm going to turn to David. And David, I know you from Facebook. We've met one time at a coffee shop when we were trying to find a way to get mental health clinicians and MFTs on Medicare, which, by the way, there is a bill coming up in Congress and the Senate in 2 weeks. And so, political note, call your Congress people and your senator and tell them to vote yes to adding mental health clinicians and marriage family therapists to the Medicare bill. Do it today. Anyway, tell us a little bit about you and who you are and where you are.
Okay. I'm a licensed mental health counselor in Gainesville, in private practice. And I've been in private practice for about 15 years. Started out at the local agency in Gainesville as a mental health counselor there, and also doing substance abuse counseling. Mm-hmm. Before that, I was working at a juvenile detention program, doing the same kind of thing with adolescent males.
Locally?
Yep.
Oh wow.
Well, out in Levy County, it was the.
That's close enough.
Yeah.
Are you originally from this area?
I grew up in Illinois, a small town in southern Illinois.
We lived in Utica.
Utica.
Yeah. How small was your town?
It has to be north compared to where I'm from.
It's 80 miles southwest of Chicago.
Okay. Yeah. My hometown has about 9,000.
Oh, that's huge compared to Utica.
Really?
Utica was 600.
Okay.
But they could have used your services as substance abuse. There were 10 bars in Utica. Never went to them. Anyway. So how did you end up here in Gainesville?
Well, I grew up in Illinois, and I was ready for warmer weather. As soon as I graduated from college, I knew I wanted to eventually go to grad school and become a therapist. I had family in Florida, so I moved down here. I got a job actually at the Department of Children and Families, and then did some other work before I went to grad school. So.
Cool. I assume you went to UF?
I went to UF. Yeah, I did the rehab counseling master's program there.
Okay, all right. And your private practice is, I know at one point you transitioned to primarily telehealth. Are you back in person as well?
Yeah, so during COVID, between that and having kids that were, not going to be in school for a while, I went to totally telehealth, which has actually been, a really positive experience, getting that experience doing a lot of EMDR therapy with individuals.
Yeah.
Through telehealth. So that's been a real positive experience. So now I actually have like a blend. I have 2 days where I work from home and do telehealth, and 3 days where I'm in the office.
Cool. Well, one of you have many areas that you are very adept in, but one of the areas that you have become more prominently known for in the area is EMDR. And so tell me a little bit about what do those initials stand for?
Yeah, so it's the EMDR stands for eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing.
And those are big words, but what does it do?
So, well, EMDR therapy is a very structured therapy that helps people that have experienced some sort of adverse life event. It helps to diminish the impact that still has on the individual.
Right.
So it helps to minimize the intrusive thoughts, images, negative beliefs, and negative feelings that come from adverse life events.
Now you're using the term adverse life events. Is that what we would refer to as trauma?
Yeah, I mean you could use that word for sure.
Okay.
And it was created in the 80s when it was created. Francine Shapiro, psychologist that created EMDR therapy, she was treating individuals with post-traumatic stress disorder.
Right.
And so as it's become, an evidence-based practice, that's primarily what it's known for.
So when we think of trauma, I think kind of defining what trauma is, it may be helpful. So how do you define trauma?
So with trauma in the EMDR world, we often refer to, there's big T traumas, little t traumas. The big T traumas is often what most people think about when they think of trauma, some kind of near-death experience or natural disasters, that kind of thing. And then little t traumas would be more like, maybe a childhood wounding experience, some kind of, maybe some kind of embarrassing, humiliating thing that happened in school or something when you were a kid, something like that. That can still be just as impactful in our life.
Right.
That's happened in the past.
Right. Because oftentimes we bring that past to the present, and then the response that we have in the present, we may be acting like that 10-year-old us and responding in that way. So EMDR is a method and an approach that is able to help people by using a combination of approaches and techniques within it, right? So tell me a little bit about the eye movements and what goes on with that and how that's linked to reprocessing.
Okay. Yeah, so the eye movements, what that is it's a form of bilateral stimulation. And so with EMDR, it's an 8-phase protocol that's followed, and part of that is using some form of bilateral stimulation to help activate the memory. And so with EMDR therapy, you're working with memory networks, so to speak, of the past event, the past memory, and so the eye movement is the primary form of bilateral stimulation. There's other ways to do bilateral stimulation.
Like what?
So a popular way to do the bilateral stimulation, like with children, is something called a butterfly hug, where you're tapping back and forth on your body. Usually it's tapping back and forth on their shoulders.
Right.
And so EMDR therapy is kind of weird. It's like the eye movement is done like the classic way is to just do sets of eye movement. The therapist goes back and forth with their finger, and so you can do tapping where the individual taps back and forth on their legs, or they, like I was saying with the butterfly hug, it's something that is common. There's the tactile pulsars that individuals can hold, where it give you like a vibration back and forth.
Sure.
In the hand, there's auditory tones that people can wear a headset and it can go back and forth like that. But,
right. And why is that important, the bilateral stimulation?
So I think the theory is that we have two hemispheres of the brain, and so some of the things we've learned about memory in the brain, that there's something about that helps access what's there, access the memory, access the emotions, the feelings and sensations in your body. All of that tends to help arise or come to the surface when you start doing the bilateral stimulation. And over time, as you process through that stuff, you get to a place of calm, which is the idea with the therapy.
Right. And so with the bilateral stimulation, you combine that with the eye movements, or that is the eye movements. But you also mentioned that you work with negative cognitions, the things that people say to themselves about themselves. And in EMDR, you focus also on your bodily sensations as well. Why the focus on your body and those sensations and the thoughts? Yeah,
so one of the things we talk about in EMDR therapy is there's this dual awareness. So if we're processing an upsetting memory, to kind of go back a little bit, I think when we experience trauma, it affects our nervous system. Something is very overwhelming, and so we go into the fight or flight mode. If we're in shock, maybe we're kind of paralyzed, not paralyzed, but kind of frozen in that moment.
Sure.
And so what can happen later is we've repressed a lot of those emotions, a lot of that was so overwhelming. And so we continue later to have these symptoms, these feelings and sensations in our body. And so as we're processing an upsetting memory, there's an awareness that is, what I'm experiencing in the present as I'm remembering different aspects of what happened.
Right. And I would assume that at times it becomes overwhelming for folks as they reprocess these memories and work through these memory channels. And focusing on the body sounds to me to be a little bit like mindfulness, and being aware of that. So how is mindfulness incorporated into EMDR?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm a big fan of mindfulness practices, and so a lot of times in preparation to process some upsetting memory with the client, we'll do some mindfulness activities so people can experience just what it is.
Sure.
And so it also teaches individuals some skills. And so before we even get into that work of processing, upsetting feelings, we've done some activities in preparation, so they can pull from that.
Right.
As we're if they're dealing with something that feels overwhelming or really uncomfortable.
Do you have a favorite mindfulness activity that you like to use with clients?
I have a few that I like. One of the things in the EMDR training that I like is they teach you how to create a calm, safe place. I'm assuming you got that when you did the training.
Yes, I did.
Yeah. And so what's really cool about that is we're using a positive memory.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like doing that with clients first before we get into processing upsetting memories, because it's positive.
Right.
And they're so what that is it's using a positive memory, like being at the beach or being at the mountains, and you're enhancing that positive memory and all those positive sensations that come with that positive memory.
Right.
And then you can anchor a word or phrase to that positive place, and so they get that really positive experience, and they're usually really surprised, like, wow, I really feel calm.
Right. That's
surprised.
been the experience. My clients have been like, oh my God, I actually feel like I'm back in that setting, and they'll describe their body just kind of being overcome with calmness. And it is amazing experience to watch people, because you can actually see them in session as they just kind of, I call it woosah. They just kind of relax and build into it. And so that, even though, we learn that particular term, like calm safe space, that could be something that anybody in the community can use for whatever. Create this image that's very calming, very soothing, very positive, and just focus on creating that image, the sights, the sounds, the smells, the touches. And by the way, mine would never be the beach. There are sharks at the beach, and the mountains maybe. Mountains. I could do that for a short period of time. But anyway.
And the neat thing about it is it's individualized.
Right.
So it could be grandma's house and smelling her cooking.
Oh yes.
It could be something as unique as that.
Yeah.
Or anything. So the individual gets to pick it, and it's their own, positive experience.
Right. So they don't have to make something up. Now, what do you do with somebody who's challenged with creating images in their mind? Like, I have clients who will say, I can't do a visual. That doesn't fit for me. Do you have clients like that?
Well, I think I've never had anybody that couldn't do the calm, safe place. What I've had is, individuals that maybe had such significant anxiety, that they were in such a hyper-arousal state that they weren't able to get to a calm place. And so, that's another thing I like with using something like Calm Safe Place as a preparation. It helps me get a sense of where someone is.
Sure.
As far as kind of the assessment phase.
Right.
And so in that kind of situation, we'll shift gears and do something different.
Right. And I do appreciate that even though it's very organized and very specific in what you do when you do it, there's still flexibility in the model. So you can take a step back and go from there. But let's try and paint a picture for somebody who may be wanting to address some little T traumas or maybe even some big T traumas. And so they were to call you and say, David, I'd like to work with you. By the way, how do people get in touch with you?
Well, you can call me. I'm on Psychology Today.
You can give them the number, it's okay.
Okay, you can call me at my number, 352-281-3428. You can find me on Psychology Today.
Do you have a website?
No website.
Oh my gosh. Really? Just Psychology Today?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
I guess I get a lot of word of mouth. That's how I get a lot of referrals.
Yes, you do.
That is one thing though that I eventually will have that I currently don't have.
A website?
Yeah. Maybe you can help me with that.
I can help you. Totally off base, but one of the things we're doing here at the center is we have a computer lab that we're starting, and the idea is to teach adolescents, at-risk youth, how to work the servers and build websites and market them to people like you or me or somebody. Total aside, but anyway, we can help you with that, David. That's fine.
That's great.
Or if anybody wants, no, don't contact David soliciting. That would be bad. So they can call you. So let's say somebody calls you and they come in for that first visit. We're not going to go through the whole model of therapy, but generally speaking, how does it start and what can one expect as they journey through this process?
Okay. So, sometimes I get a lot of people that are looking for an EMDR therapist, and in that situation, people usually have an idea of traumas that they've experienced that they want to work on, right? It's a past memory that they're having intrusive thoughts and images about that past event, and it's real clear that they want to work on that. And so with something like that, we do a history taking. We go through the events that they've experienced that are still bothersome that they want to work through. And then we also identify, you mentioned earlier the negative cognitions, and so we'll identify what we mean when we say, in case people don't know what that is, it's a negative theme. So,
right.
Like a common one with anxiety would be, like I am powerless or I'm not in control. And so we can organize a treatment plan around each of those themes. So, for example, let's say I have a trauma that I experienced, and that was the theme we identified. So I wasn't in control. And so there's still this part of my brain that's telling me in the present I'm not in control.
Right.
So it's creating a lot of anxiety. So part of the treatment planning is going through and listing all the events that resonate with that theme.
That I'm not in control.
That I'm not in control. So oftentimes I'll do we call it a float back, where you go back to the original time where you first remember feeling not in control.
Right.
And so we'll go through each of those events, and it's amazing when you start working on that with somebody, because people oftentimes have been carrying the burden of that
for a
so
long time.
long. Yeah. And it's really exciting to see how freeing that is for people when you start working through those memories and those painful events. Like you mentioned, like the little T traumas. To see people shift and they're unburdened with that and begin to heal. That's one of the exciting things about EMDR therapy for me is because it's so targeted, right?
Right.
It's like in therapy, in traditional talk therapy, this is my experience, is that I would, it might take several sessions with somebody to get them to a certain point to where, okay, now they're talking about this upsetting event.
Right.
With EMDR, it's like, boom, we'll go right to it.
Right.
We start with what's there, and so and people are often, surprised at how quickly they can really shift and start to feel better.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that is so attractive to folks is the efficacy of EMDR and how rapidly it can work, right? And I think in the initial formulation of the modality, it was like 6 to 8 sessions is what they were shooting for. Is that a realistic time frame for some people, or do you find that it takes some people more? Or does it just depend on how many traumas and what's going on with them?
Yeah, I think a lot of that has to do with how much trauma someone's experienced. As somebody who is well functioning and doesn't really have any anxiety or depression they're dealing with,
right?
And they experience like a single trauma. I've worked with individuals like that, and we had 3 sessions.
Wow.
And it was like, they're like, I'm good. And I never saw them again. And that was it. And then, on the other end of the spectrum, I've had, an individual that maybe had a really difficult childhood, a lot of abuse,
right,
and things like that. And then maybe they, in adulthood, continued, in an abusive relationship, and just trauma after trauma their whole life. An individual like that is going to have a lot more to do.
Yeah.
A lot of work.
Are there folks for whom EMDR might not be an appropriate approach to use?
Sure. I think there's a certain, cognitively, I think an individual has to be, people with cognitive impairment may not be a good fit. And, so that would be a situation where it wouldn't be a good fit. There's been a lot of studies on so there's PTSD, that's the post-traumatic stress disorder. I use it a lot with individuals with anxiety. You can target triggers for anxiety and things like that really well. A lot of people with depression, it's caused by, traumatic events or adverse life events. excuse me, something like OCD, it's not designed to, it's not the ideal therapy for OCD, but you can work with an individual that has OCD, that has traumatic events, obviously, that may be exacerbating their OCD.
Right.
So there's some distinctions there, I think it's important to make.
Okay. So it works for a variety of things, but not necessarily, it's not a one size fits all and a fix for everything.
Correct.
What about addictions? Does it work for addictions?
So I work with, that's one of the specialties I have in my practice is people in recovery.
Mm-hmm.
I think that many people who battle addiction have developed problems with drug and alcohol due to trauma.
Right.
And so I think that it's a great fit for people in recovery. And then also, I've done a lot of work with individuals in recovery that have a lot of regret and carry a lot of shame about things they did when they were actively using. And so it works really well to process the shame and those types of feelings that come with regrets that they have, that they were, things that they did when they were using. So.
Right. So you talked about folks who, will call you and they're looking for EMDR. And so they'll come in with these lists. What's it like working with somebody who may not know about EMDR or may not conceptualize the little t traumas as traumas? How do you navigate that with them?
Yeah, so if I think it's a good fit, well, actually, before we go on to that, I thought of another thing about individuals with addiction. So one of the neat things about EMDR is there's a lot of people that kind of have a focus, like addiction or within the EMDR world as far as therapists.
Uh-huh.
And there's been different protocols developed for different aspects.
Sure.
And so there's a protocol for individuals that in recovery or trying to stay sober that helps with cravings.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a separate protocol that can be followed to help reduce cravings, for example. So I just wanted to make sure I threw it out there.
You know what I've not been able to find though?
What's that?
One related to sex addiction or porn addiction. There's nothing out there for that yet. And so we are looking at working with somebody with lots of experience developing protocols to try and evaluate how to do one for sex addiction, porn addiction. In many ways, they're similar to other addictive patterns and behaviors and that sort of stuff, but in many ways, they're unique. So, in consultation, my consultant was like, might just have to use the general protocols for addiction, and she did mention the cravings one.
Yeah, detours, is that the acronym?
Yeah. The detour stands for what?
I don't remember what
Me
it
either.
stands
I just put you on the spot anyway. Well, if you want to know what detours is, email us at office@GainesvilleCounselingCenter.com and we will put that up for you. So I do terrible with acronyms.
There's just so many to remember.
And there's a ton of them in EMDR, and I'm like, okay, I have my manual in front of me. Do you have your manual in front of you all the time, or do you got it memorized now?
I don't anymore, but I did, and I think that's totally fine to have it close by. So I think, I first trained in 2014, so it's been 8 years. So I've done it enough that I've got it memorized.
Yeah, good. I don't.
I think I threw you off track though. Before I went into something, I wanted to go back to the addiction, but you were asking me about
the people that they're not necessarily looking for an EMDR therapist, right? They may not conceptualize their little t traumas as traumas. How do you work with them if in your discussions with them and intake, you come to think, oh, this will be a good method for them?
Yeah, so I actually do that. I do that quite a bit actually, and so I think it's I bring it up and I educate them about it. I let the individuals know how it works, why I think it would be a good fit. I think that also comes with the rapport they establish with people and trust. If they and I always let them know you can try it, and if at any moment you don't like what's happening, we won't do it. There's no obligation. And then sometimes, like I mentioned before, doing something like the Calm Safe Place activity where they get to experience what the bilateral stimulation is like.
Right.
Because like I said, it's kind of weird, and so they get to experience it in a positive way.
Right.
And so they get a sense of what that feels like and how effective it can be to really shift how they're feeling.
Exactly.
So, it usually gets some buy-in when they get to start off.
When it starts positive,
yeah.
Then you get into the hard stuff, and it's like, don't want that.
Well, my experience too is people, when they're so surprised, especially somebody who's been dealing with anxiety for so long, some of the thoughts they have, it's like, okay, is this gonna last? And it's like, I feel really calm right now, but it's not gonna stick.
Because nothing else is ever fixed.
Right. And it feels weird, to always have been feeling those negative feelings and the anxiety, and then all of a sudden to be to a place of calm. It's
sorry.
It's surprising to them.
Yeah, and the same thing with folks who struggle with depression. They get to a place where they're like, oh, it's not going to work. Then they start to feel better, and then they say to themselves, well, it feels good today, but I'll see how it is tomorrow. And so that's part of the process.
Sure, they're skeptical, and understandably so.
Yeah. You know how I used to refer to EMDR? I used to, when we were have our MFT meetings here or our training sessions, all you EMDR folks would start talking about EMDR, and I would just start moving my fingers really fast. That's all I knew about it. So that's how I refer to y'all. That's it, right? Now that I know, we're getting everybody trained here in EMDR.
Awesome.
So, well, talk about training. What is the training like for somebody who wants to do EMDR?
Yeah, so there are a number of different trainings for one.
Mm-hmm.
So when I did the training, like I said, in 2014, it was done over 2 weekends.
Mm-hmm.
So there was the first weekend, and it's all day, each day on the weekend, and then you do 5 hours of consultation after the first weekend.
Right.
And that's with an approved consultant, somebody who's been through a lot of training, and that's how you complete the first weekend. So you have to do these, which I think is a great model, is you do these, it reinforces, so you actually start using EMDR as a clinician and you're practicing that, and you're consulting with an individual, on how it's going,
right,
and sticking to the protocol. And then the way it was set up when I did it, a couple months later, you do a second weekend.
Mm-hmm.
After that, you do 5 hours of consultation again. So you're learning more advanced cases,
right,
and situations, and some more skills. You learn how to do something called resource development, installation.
Which, when they put that in there, I was like, I did not learn that the first weekend, and I have no idea what the hell they're talking about.
That's a really fun one to do.
Mm-hmm.
So we can talk more about it afterward if you want.
Well, once I finish my first 10 hours of supervision, I'm coming over to you. But anyway, resource installation, I think, is fantastic. I have a difficult time explaining exactly in real words what resource means, right? But in a nutshell, resource is a skill or a set of skills, right, that you need to get to where you want to go.
Right.
So.
Yeah, so the second weekend, then you do the 5 hours. I know you know all this, but and then that's when I guess you're trained.
Mm-hmm.
You're considered EMDR trained. So you've done weekend 1 plus 5 hours of consultation, weekend 2 plus 5 hours of consultation. And then for individuals that want to go beyond that and get fully certified, clinicians don't have to be certified, obviously,
Right.
to practice EMDR therapy, but to go on and get fully certified, there's 20 more hours of consultation. And I think it's a requirement of 50 hours of EMDR therapy that you're doing with clients.
Right.
So the 20 additional hours of consultation, and then you do like 12 hours of like CEUs and EMDR training,
Yeah.
some kind of other educational stuff, and then you can be fully certified.
And that's through EMDR, right?
Right.
So EMDR is a national organization that offers training and certification for those who are seeking certification. Does it also have, maybe you don't know this, does EMDRIA's website also have resources for the general public?
Yes, yeah, they do. And it's an international association.
Oh, excuse me.
So it's EMDR International.
So we hold up our pinky.
And they also oversee consultants.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I'm at right now. Is I'm a consultant in training.
Right.
So middle of next year, I'll be a fully approved consultant. So I'll be one of those individuals that can consult with people.
And you'll be the only one in Gainesville, won't you?
I don't know. Maybe. I know other people that are certified. But
Right.
But I don't know anybody.
I have not heard anybody else doing the consultant component to it.
Yeah, and same deal with consultant. You got to do 20 more hours of being a consultant.
Yeah. They like the 20s.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but it's
I'm sure they have a reason. I don't know. So, is there anything else you think would be in general good for folks to know about EMDR and what it does? And
I'm gonna have to talk about it all day. I'm really, like I said, I'm really passionate about it because it's exciting to see people heal, and people that had maybe been in therapy before and didn't get things resolved that they wanted to, or just really didn't know that there was something out there,
Right.
for their trauma. I was actually going to say, that it can be used for so many other ways.
mm-hmm.
Just some, I've worked with individuals, for example, like get referred through like an EAP, that would be a workplace
Right.
scenario, and something like, somebody gets referred because they're having difficulty with their boss.
Right.
Right. Seems like a pretty benign kind of reason to be in counseling, maybe. But as you dig deeper, and you explore like what the theme is there, sometimes what emerges is something that maybe goes back a lot farther.
Right.
Right. So like earlier we were thinking of the theme of feeling powerless. Right. That is a great example of like in a workplace situation where maybe someone feels powerless when their boss does whatever.
Right.
Right. And so that's bringing up stuff for them. And that's how we end up going down this road of, well, what's this other stuff? And we're identifying that theme. It turns out that they had someone in their past that abused their power.
Right.
Maybe, for example. And so now we're targeting those memories, and as we work through that, and that gets resolved, now they're empowered to be able to deal with the present.
Right.
In the workplace. And
Yeah.
so it's really exciting, to see how things unfold that way.
Right. In EMDR world, they call that a future template, right? And so you create this future template of how you would rather respond to your boss or in situations where you might not have power. Instead of acting this way or responding this way, how would you like to respond? And that's where that resourcing stuff comes in.
Yeah.
Yeah, see. I know the theory. Doing it.
It's fun. It's really fun. it's a job that I feel like I would do
Mm-hmm.
if I didn't even have to work for money. If I had all the money, I would do it for free.
Oh, well, come over here. I have a room for you. It currently has podcast equipment in it. You're a busy man. Do you have a wait list?
Yeah, I'm pretty full right now.
That's what I thought. Yeah. Unfortunately, that's the reality around town. Is coming out of COVID and then everything else that's going on. I mean, the call for mental health services has just been escalated.
Yeah.
And but again, if somebody wanted to reach out and get in touch with you, give them that number again.
Okay, so you can Google David Beasley LMHC and you'll find me on the web. I'm on Psychology Today. You can call me at 352-281-3428.
Very good. So, I do a lot with sex therapy too, right? That's kind of my gig in sex addictions.
That's why that was your favorite thing to talk about in your last
And
episode.
it's always my favorite thing to talk about. Would you like to talk about sex? Do that. But did you know that we have an official sponsor for the podcast?
Is that right?
Yes. See, we created this online sex toy shop that people can purchase adult toys at pleasurepoints.shop. And the wonderful thing about it is that the proceeds from the purchases goes right back into the center, and we provide free therapy when people purchase items there. So it's a wonderful way to pleasure yourself while helping others get some EMDR. It's pleasurepoints.shop. So I'm not going to put you on the spot, David, but if you need anything, just go there.
I'll keep it in mind.
I don't see your name. I don't see who orders. I just see the money when it goes into the bank account. And apparently, I created a fervor at certain military installation bases in Texas when it became known that I had this shop. Lexi's boyfriend is in the military and told his base. And I looked on the statistics for the shop one day and I was like, holy cow, how did all these people find this? Because I didn't advertise it. And then Lexi said, oh, I told so-and-so. And
so word of mouth is powerful. Spreading by
word of mouth is powerful. I'm not even going to go down that road. The pleasurepoints.shop for all your adult toy needs. It has been a pleasure having you on the podcast today, and I appreciate you taking time to come and to share your knowledge of what is one of, I think, the most powerful approaches to therapy out there. And if people have questions, you can email us here at office at GainesvilleCounselingCenter.com, and we'll get them to David and get the answers there. But once again, if you need services, 352-448-9120, or find us on the web at www.GainesvilleCounselingCenter.com.